the Americans put enormous pressure on India to send our troops to Iraq. There's a level of fascinating detail in General Vij's memoirs, and I'll start with you, General Vij. This is a very interesting chapter in your book. Every chapter is interesting, but some stories are particularly interesting because here, Mr. Vajpayee, the Prime Minister, does not commit specifically to you that this will not happen. He says, "Hum soch rahe hain. We're thinking about it." The Americans, meanwhile, are asking for at least 17,000 Indian soldiers in Iraq. You are very outspoken. You express your opinion clearly. You say, "Why should we fight?" I'm quoting from your book. "Why should we fight a dirty war for another nation?" You then get concerned because the Americans seem to be building up momentum. They're sending delegates. Meetings are taking place to sort out details. You start writing letters where you actually question or you make your position very clear that this should not happen. And in your book, you say that you tried to, find those letters and you could not find those letters. Now, I want you to talk about this time. Eventually, India does the wise thing. No troops go to Iraq. The army, you have put your foot down. Vajpayee, eventually, we think that veto from you must have played a big part because from your book, it sounds like Vajpayee was actually considering, Prime Minister Vajpayee at that time, the Prime Minister was considering doing this. General Vij, talk about the Iraq ask from America.
Okay, Barkha, with your permission, is slightly longish answer.
Yes.
At that time, I must quote you a story. I had read about the book which Mr. General McMaster had written over the NSA with President Trump at that time in 2017-18, where he talks of dereliction of duty by 5 silent men. And 5 silent men were the chiefs of staff. And he says, if this happened, all that fiasco happened because of those 5 silent men. Now, that is the problem. You see, in case the government and the political and the military are not on the same grid, and there's less discussion, like what happened in Prakram. You tell the chief that you move and we will let you know later. The wars are not fought that way. Every detail must be sorted out before you launch your troops. After all, there are lakhs of people who are going to be launched. So now that is the problem. The government had, I think, more or less made up their mind to send troops. When I got to know about it, I was on a short spot of leave. I came back after 5-6 days, and when I heard all this, I thought over it with my own staff as to why are we sending troops. Number one, why should we fight their dirty war? Because the entire world was at that time criticizing them. Number two, what will be the duration of the war? What is our task? None of these things we know. We may get drawn into a long drawn war, and that may carry on indefinitely. We had a lesson from Sri Lanka ourselves as to what happened to us in Sri Lanka. That was also the time when we were very busy on our roadside against Pakistan because we were laying our fence and the obstacle system so to cut down on the infiltration. And Pakistan was also very active. So under no circumstances, we were in a position to send troops to Iraq. And why should we will be called mercenary that we are being paid because we are fighting under their flag, not under our flag. So for all those reasons, I wrote to the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister before going for the CCS meeting. And in the CCS meeting, surprisingly, the views which were expressed didn't appear to be very encouraging. People were very keen. In the end, I must say to the Prime Minister's credit, all that he said was one word, Chintan Karenge. And Mr. Vajpayee spoke very little. And Chintan Karenge meant perhaps I felt that he is perhaps more or less convinced that we should not go in there. Now, whether that happened that way or not, I really have no way to know. But to me, it appears that may have played some part. But the fact is, why should it not be discussed with the army in detail? Army means the 3 services in detail as to what does the government want to do. They can't just give an order to you that do this. Then if that is going to be the story, then things are not going to work out well.
That's very bluntly said, and you were anything but like the 5 silent men. Because we have just 5 minutes left and I have another very important story to cover. General Shukla, I'll start with you. Quick take on the on what is at the essence of this Iraq argument, is General Vij making a broader point. You can't take a decision on our behalf without consulting us, discussing it with us, getting us on board. General Shukla?
So I think, General Vij had that rare ability to do two things: speak truth to power, but he also had a well-honed political instinct. And I just, like to give you two examples from the book. One is his, great powers of garnering consent and advocating the army's cause. So the anti-infiltration obstacle system, which we haven't had time to discuss, and which was a game changer in the context of infiltration. Everybody opposed him, from the vice chief to the DGMO. Somebody like General Nanavati, a very celebrated and respected soldier, he opposed it. And but today, everybody acknowledges the immense benefits of the AIOS. So when you have to get change, you need courage. Also look at the grace of General Nanavati. Despite opposing it initially, in a later book, he says that it was a game-changing decision. But I mean, the ability to garner consensus and General Vij's power with advocacy, this A.D. Singh committee report. So I think on the day of the book release, General Vij tells Mr. Pranab Mukherjee that, I've got relieved of a great pressure because I owed this to my men. And Mr. Mukherjee says, as a matter of fact, I am relieved because you were reminding me virtually every second day. It was me who was under pressure. So this great passion and advocacy which General Vij had. So both these qualities, speaking truth to power and a well-honed political instinct, which is distinct from politicality. It is a political but a well-honed political instinct. I think these were two attributes of General Vij we need to admire and emulate. And they also come out wonderfully well in the book. With that, I'll have to take your leave, Barkha.
Okay. Thanks, General Shukla. We'll let you go. General Hussain, let's bring you in at this point on the Iraq and the troops question. Go ahead, sir.
See, Barkha, I must admit one thing which perhaps General Vij also doesn't know, that if this decision had been positive, the man most affected would have been me. Why? Because when the MS, the Military Secretary General Mahesh Vij, came back after discussing this with General Nirmal Vij, he called me. I was his Colonel MS policy, and he said, "You be prepared to go to Iraq as the commander of the 1st Brigade, which will go there." I said, "Absolutely, wonderful." He said, "You have had the experience of being in Sri Lanka. You have had the experience of being in the United Nations. I think this is a kind of a situation which calls for your experience." I was absolutely thrilled. But later I realized what a sound decision General Vij had made. You see, much of the leadership probably was imagining that Iraq was a United Nations peacekeeping operation. Little did they realize that this is going to be one of the worst hybrid conditions ever existing anywhere in the world. The Americans had never heard of the IED, if you remember. And yet later we saw this very famous film called The Hurt Locker, in which you saw nothing but IEDs which hit the American army. What would have hit us? We would have only known. I think General Vij needs to be saluted. He needs to be feted for having put this squarely to the political community, the political leadership of India, that you could achieve nothing by sending the Indian army to Iraq. It would not be anything great diplomatically. In fact, it would be actually a blunder.
You're saying, General Hussain, that at first, when you discovered, and can we just bring up the slides of the Iraq section in the book again, because it's very interesting. You're saying at first, when you were asked to go, you were quite excited because you thought, as a soldier does, that this is going to be a challenging global battlefield. And then with the benefit of hindsight, you started understanding that what a calamitous mistake it may have been, because guess what? There were no weapons of mass destruction. The very basis, first of all, on which that war was fought was a lie. Secondly, why should, as General Vij says, the Indian troops fight under any other flag except either India's or the United Nations when it comes to peacekeeping?
Absolutely. And the rules of engagement would have been completely alien to us.
Yes.
Fighting under that kind of a flag, the rules of engagement would have been completely alien. The Indian army under the UN flag fights very differently. You saw it in Somalia, you saw it in Cambodia, everywhere. We went in with limited operations. We carried out a huge amount of winning hearts and minds. That's how the Indian Army always functions everywhere in these limited kind of operations. The Americans didn't do it. The British didn't do it. There was no question of hearts and minds in Iraq. The Indian Army would have been at odds with everyone there, fighting a war which was completely alien to it.
Absolutely.